Cool. Well, there we go. Hey, everyone. So, my name is Jon Rease. Welcome to the Comedy Hostel Podcast. I'm a Montreal-based stand-up comic, and I run a weekly stand-up show here in Montreal every week for travelers and locals at M-Bar. It's part of Montreal Hostel. It's a really great bar, and we call it the Comedy Hostel, or even Stand-Up at the M. No one really knows what my show is called, but I think we'll go with one of those two. Everyone confuses it. That's fine. I'm a little bit confused myself sometimes. And on this podcast, we aim to find where comedy and travel intersect, and we map it out for you via an audio Venn diagram. And you are finding us on the Mobcast Network. And the man behind the Mac is our producer, Rease Kirchner. How are you?
Good, man. Yourself?
Good, thank you. And this is an episode where we're going to really travel into the unknown, mainly because I don't really know either of my guest or my co-host. I've met them before, but I don't know them well. And we're actually joined by a Jon and a Rease, both of whom spell their names differently than Jon Seelig and Rease Kirchner over here. So I'm joined by my co-host for the week, John Mostyn. I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, you did, Jess.
Good. I was listening.
I always tell people it's like Boston with an M. And people go, yeah.
That's not what you told me when you came in here.
No, I didn't tell you, but I usually tell everyone else.
Good.
All
right.
Person I didn't tell that to.
I'm glad to be rejected from.
I find that when people introduce me on stage, it's like a hilarious sort of different pronunciations of my name, so I don't generally tell people just to see what they say.
Gotcha. Well, Jon, you are clearly, like I mentioned, from Scotland.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us where you're living now and a little bit about yourself? He showed up with a 6 of Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Yeah.
So he's kind of living up to some of the stuff we've already discussed.
Don't forget the vodka.
But he's really mellow, and he's got. Yeah, it's true. He brought a vodka and Clamato juice, which has never happened in the history of this podcast or any of my parties that I've ever had. Not that I've had so many parties. But why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown of why you're in Montreal, where you're living now, and how you ended up where you're living now?
Okay, cool. Well, I'm in Montreal just for the Just for Laughs festival. Purely a holiday from work, 2 weeks. Big comedy fan. First time in Montreal. Thought I'd come check it out. So far, so good. I'm originally from Glasgow, Scotland, and I've been living in Toronto for almost 3 years now. People always ask me why I moved to Toronto. No real reason. I just kind of was sort of bored. My job wasn't going so well. Booked a flight because it was because I'm Scottish. I'm stereotypically cheap, so it was the closest destination in Canada. And I turned 30 a couple of years ago, and you could get working holiday visas for a year. So that was the last chance of doing something I'd never been. So I thought if I don't do it, then I'll never do it. So I thought I'll get a 1 year. Even if I stay for a year or less, then fine, at least I've done it and come back. But I've ended up staying, and my permanent residency is hopefully in the post.
So how long have you been doing comedy, and how did that start? And, that's 2 questions at once. I'll ask a third. I've been accused of asking several questions at once, and I'm learning as I do this podcast to not make these kind of errors. So how did you get started in comedy? How long has it been?
Well, I started comedy, it must have been about 27, 28, and I've been... my whole life wanting to do stand-up and never having the nerve to do it. Used to be very socially awkward in my early years. Then I took one of those comedy workshop things where you do a gig at the end of it.
I'm familiar with that. That's exactly how I got started.
Well, what I learned from that is that they're pretty pointless. You just have to go out there and do it, right? So I started doing it. Then, again, I was a very, sort of not very confident person. So, I do a few shows. Never really knew what my material was, so for a couple of years on and off, and then started doing it more seriously when I moved to Toronto there in the last year. I finally have the nerve to go up and do it. I'd always have self-doubts, that kind of thing, so not the funniest of stories, but that's what happened.
Well, not everything has to be funny.
Sometimes
we need the truth.
Yeah,
we just want the truth on this podcast. It's not always about being hilarious. I mean, people might have that expectation, but sometimes the truth is just a wonderful thing. Safe to say.
Well, yes, unless you're talking to immigration,
which you might be.
Yeah,
for all you know, you might be. So maybe you better hold off on that truth.
Yeah,
so where you told me in our brief exchange that you've done a bit of traveling yourself.
Yes.
Where have you been?
Well, I started traveling in my early 20s. First of all, went sort of backpacking around Europe. Started off in Sweden, worked my way down to Holland. It's a bit of a long story. I met a guy in Sweden who was in a band. Said to come over to Sweden and help him on his trip. He's doing a tour with his band. Got over to Sweden. The tour was cancelled. Had no money, but I booked a flight back to Holland 14 days later. So me and my friend went. We're both unemployed. We had to basically travel through Europe with no money and like going into trains, into the toilets and trains, hiding so you didn't have to pay for the fare, sleeping rough on the street, that kind of thing. So that was my first experience of travelling, which was a bit of an eye-opener, but yeah, it was good fun. And then after that, I moved to Australia with my girlfriend because our uncle lived there. And yeah, we broke up about 2 weeks into that happening. So I found myself in Australia, with no reason to be there.
None whatsoever.
I ended up staying there for 2 years. And then on the way back, came through Thailand and Asia. And then back to London for a year, back to Glasgow, and then now Canada.
So you've been everywhere.
Pretty much.
Almost. Practically the entire globe.
Yeah.
Well, Asia's a really big place. We're in Asia other than Thailand?
Mostly Thailand. Thailand was, I'd saved a bunch of money in Australia, and I'd kind of wanted to go somewhere before going home. And the travel agent said, why don't you go to Thailand? And I was like, and this is one of the things that I do a lot, is the guy's like, yeah, I'll go do that. And then with no research, turned up at Bangkok, wearing a leather jacket, like, in jeans, sweating, didn't know where anything was, what to do. The first night I was there, I ended up in a brothel by mistake.
By mistake, eh?
Yeah, honestly, by mistake. I got taken there by a cab driver because I asked him where a nightclub would be, because I was like, thought that would be where I might find some people.
Some brothels do require membership, clubs are involved, and they're definitely places that people frequent at night. I don't know how I know all this. I have no clue I know this.
Yeah. So you've heard. Yeah, so that was an eye-opener. Another thing was I realised that I had all my money for the 4 weeks in my wallet in cash, and I forgot to tell anyone that I knew that I was in Thailand. So yeah, so that was interesting because I got stopped by the police when I was in Thailand, and after that experience, I thought to myself, I should probably tell someone where I am just in case I go missing, which is great. So that's
where were mom and dad at the time?
Back in Scotland.
Okay,
like they knew I was in Australia, and they weren't expecting me to be anywhere else but Australia. And this was, I guess, when I was like 24, so I guess like 8 years ago. There was, I think there might have been Facebook. I don't think so. I'm not sure. We didn't use it like the way we did. Social media wasn't really a thing.
You're an old man, John.
I know, right? I didn't have a mobile phone till I was like, what, 22, I think? You know, it's kind of strange. But, people had mobile phones there, but they don't work. But nowadays you go abroad, everything works, social media, you know. But yeah, back in those days, you didn't. So I had to use a payphone to tell my mum and dad where I was. And they were like, okay. And I don't think they realised I was just checking in, just in case I would get arrested and go missing or something. So yeah, Thailand was interesting. That was actually probably my most fun trip. I went there myself again. It's one of those places that you meet a bunch of people, but it took me a while to sort of meet people. I was like, again, not the most confident of meeting people and going up to talking. But I ended up meeting a bunch of people who are still now my friends. I met my best friend from primary school there in a bar.
Just random coincidence?
I was...
or were they working in the brothel?
No, I was... no, that would be a story, right? No, I was actually in a bar, and a girl came up to me and asked me if I had any drugs, I remember. And I said no, but I was like sort of looking for drugs as well. And then she's like, oh, you're Scottish? My friend's from Scotland. And then I was like, all right. And we went over. And there he was, my best friend from primary 5, which I guess is like, don't know what the equivalent is here, but I guess you'd be 9 years old. Hadn't seen him probably in that time. Very bizarre, right?
So basically what you're telling us is Thailand lives up to all its cultural stereotypes with brothels and drugs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Scottish men looking for them as well, right? Living up to their stereotype abroad as well, right?
Fair enough. Isn't that Germans usually?
I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's Europeans.
Some British chaps.
Yeah. I think it's a European thing mostly. Yeah.
In terms of which countries would you say? Because I write a lot of travel-based humor when I travel, like whether in Portugal, Panama, Nicaragua. Those are the 3 big countries I've been to
Okay.
As well as New Orleans, since I've started doing comedy. And each time it's like a treasure trove of material when I'm traveling. Which country would you say, if you were to go back and maybe do some jokes on, or a story or wherever, a particular country, what's yielded kind of the most, just the funniest stuff?
I'd have to say probably Thailand, right? Because a couple of things happened to me in Thailand. First night I was in a brothel, which...
There's a recurring theme on this episode.
Well, it gets worse when I went down to, I think it's Hadrin, where they have the full moon parties. I was walking home along the sort of cliffs beside the beach, and I was looking for a lighter for my cigarette, and I seen a woman in the distance, so I asked her for a cigarette, for a lighter, and it was a ladyboy who pulled out a knife. And I had to run along, so I ran drunk along the cliff tops, wearing flip-flops, and it was about 200 yards back to my beach hut. And so I went back to my beach hut, and I spent the whole night worried that I was about to be murdered by a ladyboy again. Probably should tell more people that I'm in a foreign country.
This sounds hilarious, John. This is like my worst nightmare when I'm traveling.
What else? Oh, I met an English guy who I had to who'd never taken mushrooms before, and I had to like sit with him while he had freaked out on his first trip. That was interesting. Wasn't a pleasant experience for me, and I'm pretty sure it probably damaged him for a long time. I did meet a Canadian girl while I was there, or 3 Canadian girls who were from Toronto. Thought nothing of it, and now I'm in Toronto. 8 years later, I'm on the beach in Toronto Island. And I see this girl looking at me, and I was like, sort of, oh no, who's this sort of thing? You know, that worry when someone's staring at you that hard, right? Yeah. And then she's like, John! And I'm like, no idea, right? And she comes up, she's hugging me, and she's like, how you doing? And like, still no idea.
Really? You couldn't even remember her?
No, I have a
Did anything happen between you two?
No. We just hung out for, like, we hung out probably, her and her 3 friends for maybe 2 weeks.
She has a great memory.
Yeah, well, you know.
Or you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably my memory more than anything
Fair.
else. And yeah, she was hugging, and I'm still like, I still don't know who this is.
Awkward.
Yeah, and then she mentioned Thailand. One of the things, she's like, "How you been since Thailand?" I'm like, yeah.
Did you ever have to admit to her that you had no clue who she was when she came up to you and started hugging you?
No, because I'm very bad at remembering people, so I'm quite good at sort of trying to have a conversation before. And trying to work out where they're from and what their name is before, you know. No, I never admitted that. But that was strange, you know, a small world again. Never thought I'd see her again.
No, I
have. Up on the beach in Toronto, I'm sure that's happened to you as well.
No, it has not, because mainly the beach in Toronto really isn't much to speak of for me. When I lived there, I think I went a couple of times. But no, I've never bumped into somebody for my travels anywhere here in North America. Unfortunately, and I feel sad that you have, and I have not now.
Yeah, it'll happen.
One of these days. I have hope. I have
Yeah.
hope. Well, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a little bit of a break.
Okay.
And we're going to be back with a girl named Rease Kirchner. Rease is a travel blogger who I met at the big travel blogger conference called TBEX. And that's a thing, travel blogger conference, where 1,100 travel bloggers get together and learn about social media, how to tell great stories. There was lots of good food, drinking, and storytelling. It was a great time, and I met her there. I thought she was really hilarious, and she's got a blog. She's going to talk about that, so we'll be back to chat with her in a minute.
The Mobcast Network.
So we're good to go. After some technical difficulties, we have returned. I'm John Seelig. I'm joined by John Mostyn, which rhymes with Boston.
It does indeed.
It does. And we are joined by the first ever travel blogger in the history of the Comedy Hostel Podcast. The Comedy Hostel Podcast is its pseudonym. Joined by Rease Kirchner.
Hey guys.
Did we pronounce that correctly?
Yep, Rease Kirchner.
Good. So we have 2 Reeses and 2 Johns on this podcast. I don't know if that will ever happen again.
This is weird.
It is a little bizarre.
This is really weird.
It's
Let's
weird.
make it happen again.
We're gonna do it. This is a monumentous occasion. It's the first time in the history of any podcast, I think, where there's 2 Reeses and 2 Johns, and that comprises the entire population of people involved with the podcast. So whoever's listening, you are part of podcasting history. History. That's right. So Rease, I met Rease at TBEX, the Travel Blogger Exchange Convention Conference. I don't even know what it was at this point. But I met Rease. She was definitely an entertaining person, and I figured, Rease, why don't you just tell everyone what your blog is, what it's all about, and I think we'll go from there.
Okay. My blog is indecisivetraveller.com. My motto for the blog is choosing not to choose. So the blog kind of got started because I decided not to make any decisions about where I was going to live, where I was going to travel, or what I was going to do for a job. So I became a freelance, whatever the hell I want, and I travel where I feel like traveling. And I write about how you can still be happy and successful while doing the unconventional style of life. And I try to keep it funny.
Travel bloggers and stand-up comics, again, have so much in common. We also sometimes choose to make absolutely no commitments in our life or lifestyle. And so you've lived abroad as well, correct?
Yes, I lived in Buenos Aires, Argentina for 2 years. I also studied in Mendoza for just a summer semester as well, but most of my time was spent in Buenos Aires.
I have been to both those locations. I love them both. John, have you been to South America?
No, I want to go next year for the World Cup.
Where's Brazil?
Brazil, yeah.
Excellent.
Obviously, Scotland haven't qualified, but my dad's English, so I can pretend that I like England.
Excellent. Well, I think that's what a lot of...
My dad's Brazilian.
I actually chose my move date to Argentina based on the World Cup schedule. I was in Argentina for the past 2 World Cups.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
And is it
pretty epic, but I can't ever cheer for Brazil. It's completely against
No.
Argentine code.
No, that's the worst thing to do.
What's has that ever led to any good stories? Just being in a soccer mad country at the height of World Cup fever.
It's kind of amazing. Everything is just centered around the World Cup. I mean, I was attending school the first time, and my teacher was like, "Listen, we have to end class because Argentina is playing in the next 20 minutes. So just get the hell out of my face." And I don't care about your papers. And that's really how it was. Like, everyone really centered their lives around when the game was on. And if they won, there was nothing to be done for the rest of the day. They have a lot of fight songs that are really incredible. They make fun of the English a lot, which is
Who doesn't?
Good. So you guys have bonded over disdain for England.
Yes.
Fantastic. And Rease is our other friend Rease here is of English heritage as well. So
sorry, Rease.
Sorry.
I don't know
It's
why
not
they do
your
it.
fault,
They just have one that says "El que no salta es un inglés," which just means whoever's not jumping is an Englishman, and as if it was an insult. I don't really, but they love that chant. They do it all the time.
We're not a jumping people.
Hey, so on your website, you describe yourself as an ethnically ambiguous girl that has a penchant for the alternative. I guess we could talk about the alternative because you're sort of pretty clear on what your mantra of your blog is, which is choosing not to choose. I don't know if that means you have like someone who travels around with you who makes all the decisions for you and you just go along with the program. But because I suspect there are some conscious decisions that come into play. So maybe you can guide us through not making decisions and how that leads to the alternative.
Yeah, I mean, it's odd. I do hate making decisions, but I think it's because when I do make a decision, I'm pretty serious about it. So when I decided to move to Buenos Aires, I literally just said aloud one day, I'm like, you know what, that's it. I'm moving to Buenos Aires. And I started contacting people, looking into it. And a lot of my friends thought, like, okay, she'll probably get over this. She's probably not leaving. And then I just bought a one-way ticket and did it. So when it comes down to being indecisive, I guess that I'm at that magical, horrible age where I go to a wedding almost every month. Everyone's married, everyone has kids, and I'm so not into it that I've decided to be very indecisive about getting that job where you have to work your way up to be in management or buying a house and deciding I'm living in this city for the rest of my life, or at least for the next 20 years while I pay off this mortgage. So when it comes to my travels, I kind of just think, you know what, I've always wanted to see this place, I've got the money to do it, I'm just going to buy the ticket and go. And I don't do a whole lot of planning or research beforehand, which in some cases can be good, in some cases can be bad, but part of the reason I did that is because I used to be an insane over planner, just to the point of like ridiculousness. I had like 5-10 year plans, and it was so stressful that I had to change my whole personality to make sure that I didn't have a mental breakdown by the time age of 25.
You sound like a girl of extremes.
Yes.
You basically just reversed your...
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I mean, I got a retirement account when I was 21, as if that was really important or something, and I was just like, you know what? I have $10,000. I'm going to Argentina. Screw this. I'm not even going to get a job first. I'm just going to see what happens.
Did you blow it all?
Most of it, yeah.
Good for you. Congratulations. High five. That is incredible.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
You say you're a freelance, what you feel like. Well, how do you fund your trip? What do you do?
So most of the work I do write. I mean, obviously I make a little money off my blog. I write for other websites as a travel blogger and also as a Spanish speaker. So I'm fluent in Spanish, and I do a lot of work as an interpreter, translator. Locally, I work for a law firm as their interpreter, and I also help them do research for cases. And I used to be a preschool teacher, so I still private tutor a few kids in Spanish as well as some music classes. And so I kind of just pick all the jobs I have that I liked, my favorite parts of them, and I freelance as those instead of doing one particular job.
Cool. Which is the one you hate the most out of all those?
Though that I still do?
Yeah. Or no, let's back that up, because let's go deeper. What's the worst job you've ever had that you've only been doing to fund your travel?
I worked at a marketing firm for 2 years while I was in college, and I got paid. I was probably the only person who had more money in college than I did after, because I got paid a lot for a 21-year-old, but I literally hated every day that I went in there. It was just, I was the only girl that worked there, and I worked with a bunch of frat boys that wanted to do marketing, and they were assholes and treated me like crap, and they always made me do really dumb projects, and they had me spy on other employees. It was just awful. Like, everything about it was just a miserable experience. It was just one of those offices that has a foosball table and a weed and make them look like it's fun, but really it's awful. And I hated going in there every single day.
So you're like in an episode of a modern day Mad Men, like a real world Mad Men.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it was online marketing mostly, which, I mean, I guess helped me in the long run for my blog and stuff. But it was just, it was a boys club that I remember training a guy who later told people that I started as an intern, and I lost it. I was like, I am not an intern. I started here when this company was tiny. I'm not a fucking intern. You didn't even graduate college. You never tell people that, but you didn't. And I freaked out because I couldn't handle being around douchebag fratty boys like that all the time.
Do you get douchebag fratty boys in Argentina?
Oh my, yes. Not as douchebag, yes. Fratty, not so much. More like dudes that live with their parents but still think they're really awesome and suave.
Hey, so listen, guys, we're going to take a quick little break, and we're going to be back to discuss a little bit more about your blog. We're going to talk about life in Buenos Aires a little bit and some other stuff, whatever kind of comes up. And listen, stick around. We'll be back in like a minute.
The Mobcast Network.
Hey everyone, we're back on the Comedy Hostel Podcast. This is episode 5. I don't think I mentioned that yet, so we are on number 5. John Mostyn, our co-host, has a question for Rease Kirchner, who is our guest. Take it away.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, obviously you're well-traveled. What kind of travel tips do you have for people that have maybe not traveled as much?
I think it depends on where you're going. That really depends. But I guess just don't worry too much about seeing everything in one trip, and don't worry too much about seeing the stuff that you have to see. See what you want to see. Like, personally, I don't really give a shit about museums, and people always want to force me to go to them. And I always just have the same experience where I'm bored and I wish I were somewhere else. So look over what you want. If you want to do adventure stuff, do adventure stuff. If you love museums, do it. But don't stick just to guidebooks, and don't try to go too far off the beaten track. Like, just kind of do your own thing and enjoy it. And blogs are a great way to find that niche for yourself. If you want to know exactly what kind of trip to take in a certain area, find a blog about it.
And you focus on that, right? Because I was looking through your blog, and it's pretty clear you're what I call a tripster. You're a travel hipster, and you do your own thing. You don't do what the guidebook says. A lot of us are similar. I'm not much better. I just I saw a lot of posts in your blog really kind of outlining that. So you're looking to recommend to people what they need to do off the beaten path, correct?
Yeah, I did a post about why Times Square is worth going to, because there's certain things that are tourist traps because they're awesome and you should go to them. But I don't think that it's totally 100% necessary to go to every tourist trap. Oh. Like even in St. Louis, we have the St. Louis Arch, which is a humongous thing that people go to. And I always tell people, no, you don't really need to go up in it because it's not really the most amazing thing you've ever seen. It's just kind of a long line. But
it's funny you bring up Times Square. I was just telling my dad today because he doesn't really understand the difference between a tourist and a traveler. And I was just telling him how Times Square is really touristy. When I go there, I don't need to go there. So just out of curiosity, what do you like about Times Square? What do people need to see in Times Square? Because other than as a local once put it to me, all the lights and all the bullshit, I really don't get what's there other than a lot of advertising.
The lights, I went there at midnight, and I just thought it was really cool to just walk up and down and see the lights. I took a picture with a crazy Spider-Man, paid him $2 for it. I did some touristy stuff, but I didn't shop. I didn't care about any of that. I didn't go to a bar because they're overpriced. I went off the Times Square grid and went and got a different drink somewhere else. But it's mostly just to see it once. I don't really think that I would be in a rush to go back. I only went that one time. I think it's just an experience worth having, and then just, checking it off and being like, all right, I'm done here.
Yeah, I think, when you go traveling, you have to go see... You don't have to go museums, but you have to, say, for example, I was in Sydney. I went to see Sydney Opera House, and I turned around the corner, and there it was, and I was just like, yep, there it is.
Yeah, exactly. Just
that's true. And then I can say to people, yeah, I've seen the Sydney Opera House. It was just exactly what it was like on TV.
But you could check it off the list.
No, you check it off the list, right? But then you go and try and find the actual things that are going on in Sydney, right?
I'm being totally facetious. There's no need to check out anything off a list. That's pretty much your mantra, is what we're saying, right?
Yeah, I actually should say that I don't believe in bucket lists at all. I think those are crazy town. I don't understand, what do you, bucket lists I feel like are just to prove something else. I hate seeing little Facebook quizzes how many of these 100 places have you been to? I'm like, listen, don't judge me by which places I've been to. Maybe I have no desire to go there, so I only made it to 50 of those 100. And I don't think it really, only travel bloggers and asshole travelers will compare those kind of lists. So it's not really necessary to actually physically check off a list. If you want to have a bucket list, fine, but I certainly do not.
I have jokes about those kind of travelers. So you've been to Crazy Town. What was the best thing to do in Crazy Town?
I actually did see a place called Crazy Town in Chicago, and it was a porn shop, and I took a picture with it. But it was not. It was dirty. It was
all right. Dirty. So you're not going to do a travel blog anytime soon of the fact that we should all go visit Crazy Town. Yeah, so if you can tell us a little bit about what dating in Buenos Aires was like, that would obviously make for some really entertaining listening here. Because I'm curious.
Buenos Aires, the problem with Latinos in general is that there is something called machismo, which is just the chauvinistic belief that men wear the pants and they have to do manly things. And as someone who, I definitely am not a feminist, but I like my rights and I like my independence. So
rights are good.
When someone tells me, I don't like being ordered for or told what to do. So that was a big problem for me in Argentina because it would be insulting for me to tell a guy that I didn't want him to pay for me. And that was always weird for me. I was used to, I make my own money, I do my own thing, I don't need anyone. So that was a problem.
So how did you get about that problem? Being from North America, where it's just
did you wrestle them to the ground and force them to let you pay?
No, in Argentina, that was one thing I just sucked it up. I was like, you know what, fine, they can pay, and I just always made sure that I had money to pay for myself. But it was actually told to me by guy friends, don't even offer to pay. It just makes them feel very small, and it makes you look not as feminine, and it was really odd for me. I didn't like it, but I sucked that part up. I was really big about having my own place, living on my own, and not living, a lot of these guys live with their parents still. That's really common, to just stay living with your parents because it's expensive.
So how does that work if, let's say, you're staying in a hostel or some shared accommodation and you really like one of these guys?
When I was living in Buenos Aires, I had my own apartment, so I never really had that problem. When I was traveling around, I did go on a couple dates, but I never liked any of them. I never really liked anyone. So I personally never had to deal with the issue of trying to find a place to hook up.
I never have a problem with letting someone pay. It doesn't make me less of a man.
That's the way comics are.
In fact,
We're on budgets.
Yeah, I embrace that. Like, so yeah, if I could find a country where that happens, I could do that, no problem.
Reese, but this is awesome budget travel tips. So for women who are looking to economize, just fly down to Argentina and date men there, and they will feed you, they will take care of you, and there's really no catch. Is that the case?
Oh no, there is definitely a catch.
Oh no.
It's not an
They
STD,
are
is it?
very, very forceful with their flirting, with their touching, with everything. They're just very aggressive. And I've talked to a lot of Argentine girls, and a lot of even native Argentine women would tell me they don't date Argentine men because they are too in your face. And they would date Brazilians or Colombians. I had several other expatriate friends that were dating Latinos, but they were all from different countries, Venezuela, Chile. None of them were Argentine.
Are Argentinian women as hairy as the myth?
I'm sorry, are they as what?
Hairy. They're hairy women. Like, they're a hairy nation.
Well, no. I think the question is the men hairy? Because I don't know.
Yeah, the men and the women.
Are both of them hairy? Is the question.
I wouldn't say so. The women are pretty into waxing. They don't really believe in shaving, but they do have what I call mermaid hair. Argentines don't believe in styling their hair as much. Like, this is obviously a huge stereotype, but most women there have hair to their ass, whether it looks good or not, and they get like a half an inch trimmed off, and they just have ridiculously long hair.
Reese,
that's like their femininity. I had really short hair there, so I looked odd.
Reese, this is a podcast that marries comedy and travel. All it's about is stereotypes at the end of the day.
It seems to be the theme.
It's definitely a theme. We've already touched on how Scottish people are drunk, Jews can be cheap, Scottish people can be cheap, and how Argentine men are macho. Listen, we got to take a really short break. We'll be back in about 20 seconds our time, 1 minute your time, or vice versa. So stick around, and we'll be back in a second.
Outside there's a boxcar waiting. Outside the family store. Out by the fire breathing. Outside we wait till the face turns blue.
The Mobcast Network.
Hey, so Reese, what was your big experience at TBEX? What did you love about it? What were the positives for you?
Actually, I went to TBEX in Keystone the year before, and I have to say that Toronto was a huge improvement because I thought Keystone sucked, and I almost didn't go to Toronto because of it. But I wanted to see some people, and there was some better tourism contacts coming to this one. I thought they did a much better job of not just of the talks, but the organization of it all. The food was better. It seemed to have a better budget this time. Some of the talks were not to my liking, but I got a lot more out of this one. I took a lot more notes, and I made a lot more contacts in the tourism community than I did at the last one. So overall, I'd say it was a win.
Where is Keystone? Because the only Keystone I know of is from the old school Flash comic books. That's where Jay Garrick, the Flash, lived in Keystone City. So where exactly is Keystone?
Is that Jellystone?
No, Keystone is in Colorado. It's 3 hours outside of Denver, making it a terrible choice because everyone had to fly into Denver and then drive to Keystone. It's a middle of nowhere ski town, but I'm sure they got a sweet ass deal on it because it was the summer, so there was no snow.
All right, interesting. And so, in terms of, was there anything about TBEX that kind of, what else do you want to tell us about TBEX, I guess?
I think the one thing I thought was odd is the Expedia Night of the Stars party. So you were talking about the opening night party, which was awesome.
Right.
Food was great, booze was great, everything. Then there was the Expedia hosted a Night of the Stars party, which was on some island outside of Toronto.
Toronto Island, yeah.
Yeah. And they had all this swag there that it was like, you're supposed to look like a movie star, so they had all this feather boas and fedoras and stupid sunglasses at Expedia that no one would ever wear.
Hey,
at that party.
I wore all of that.
I'm wearing my fedora right now.
Do you really want to wear those outside of that context?
John Mostyn is wearing a boa and a fedora right now.
Yeah.
Well, I commend you, sir.
Thank you.
But the problem was they wasted their whole budget on that, and then all the bloggers got 2 drink tickets. And if there's anything that I think that all travelers can mostly agree on, is that we don't want shitty things that don't fit in our backpacks. We want more booze. So luckily I had some connections that gave me more drink tickets,
Same
but
here.
I was not pleased with the fedora to drink ratio.
No, I understand.
I love the fedora to drink ratio. I've got lots of drinks and a fedora.
He's doing well in my apartment at the brick wall. Hey, we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. Where can people find you online? Where can they get your social media? Where can they get your website? Where can they get Rease Kirchner?
Okay, my website is indecisivetraveller.com. On Twitter, it's Indecisive Rease, and Rease is R-E-A-S-E, not like Reese Witherspoon. And on Facebook, it's just Indecisive Traveller.
Excellent. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time and putting up with our technical difficulties today. We really appreciate you chatting about Argentina, TBEX, your blog, and I encourage everyone who listens to this podcast, definitely check Rease out. She's a hoot. I hung out with her at TBEX, and you're going to love her blog, and you should keep following her.
Do you know where to find more drink tickets or things?
Where did I get them?
Can I get them
some
online?
blogger friends that work for Expedia.
Cool. Listen, thanks so much.
Thanks,
We're just going to wrap up here. Guys, listen, we do this podcast every couple of weeks. We have a show happening at M Montreal, which is a hostel in downtown Montreal on the edge of the gay village. And it's at M Bar. It's every Thursday. It's a pay what you can show. We have top pros from around Canada. Even some folks from the U.S. have performed on the show. Some people from abroad. It's always an interesting time. It's always a good time. Beer is really cheap. And I perform there every week. John Mostyn will be performing there this Thursday. If this thing gets edited.
I'm still alive.
And he's still alive.
And Jimmy Carr hasn't thrown me out a taxi.
Or doesn't get kidnapped by a Jimmy Carr and a midget in a taxi.
Jimmy Carr lookalike midget. That's what I'm looking for.
That would make for an interesting act. He's like Jimmy Carr and a Jimmy Carr midget on stage, and maybe he puts his hand
throws
up.
me out of a taxi.
He puts up his hand at the midget's ass, and they do a
Oh,
ventriloquist.
that's getting a bit dark.
Definitely. Which is
mid-afternoon.
Which is not what this podcast is about. And you can follow myself on Twitter at Jon Seelig. There is no H in John, so JONSELIG. You can follow us on Twitter at MTL Comedy Hostel. That's our Facebook handle as well. And our website where everything is stored, all the lineups to our shows, this podcast, comedyhostel.com. So, John Mostyn, where can people find you?
Montreal, 4555 Avenue du Parc, room 14.
That's elaborate. That's an elaborate place to find you.
Ask the receptionist for the key. I'll be the man in the bath.
Stalkers, on your marks. And last little bit, we're part of the Mobcast Network. Reese, where can people check out other podcasts?
Go to themobcastnetwork.com, www.themobcastnetwork.
Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Another great episode. We got some great guests and comics lined up. My thanks to Rease Kirchner from Indecisive Traveller. You're welcome. Thank you to Jon Mostyn.
Welcome.
And to Rease Turner for the Mobcast Network, guys. Thanks so much. This has been episode 5. I'm Jon Seelig. Take care. Woo!
The Mobcast Network.